In 1969, America thought it owned speed. Big engines, loud exhausts, machines like the Ford Mustang ruled the streets. Power was everything, noise was everything, and nobody questioned it. But then, something quiet arrived from Japan. No roar, no hype, no warning. Just a sleek machine that would soon embarrass American muscle on its own turf. This is the story of the car that turned the Mustang into prey. At the end of the 1960s, the automotive world had already made up its mind. If you wanted speed, you bought American. If you wanted style, you bought European. And if you wanted something cheap and reliable, you bought Japanese. That was the reputation. That was the box Japan had been placed in. And nobody, absolutely nobody, expected that to change overnight. Back then, Japanese cars were seen as practical, not exciting, not fast, not desirable. They were the cars people bought when they couldn't afford something better. And that image was a problem. Because inside Japan, engineers were thinking differently. They didn't just want to build cars that worked. They wanted to build cars people dreamed about. Cars that could stand next to European legends and not feel small. Cars that could challenge American muscle and not feel weak. Inside a company called Datsun, a bold idea was forming. Not another economy car. Not another safe design. But a true sports car. Affordable, but powerful. Beautiful, but deadly. The vision was simple and dangerous. Build a car that looks like a Ferrari, drives like a Porsche, and costs less than half. It sounded impossible. But in 1969, that vision became real. The world saw it for the first time. The Datsun 240Z, and everything changed. People didn't understand it at first, because it didn't look like a cheap Japanese car. It had a long hood, a low stance, smooth curves flowing like a European exotic. It looked expensive. It looked fast. It looked dangerous. And when people saw the price, they couldn't believe it. In America, if you wanted performance, you paid big money. Cars like the Mustang dominated the streets with big V8 engines and raw power. But they were also heavy, thirsty, and not always easy to control. Then came the 240Z, with a price that undercut everything. And suddenly, buyers had a choice. But the real shock wasn't the price, it was what the car could do. Under the hood was a 2.4-liter inline-six engine, responsive. Around 150 horsepower. On paper, it didn't sound like a monster. But the car was light. Very light. And that changed everything. This wasn't just about speed. It was about control. While muscle cars struggled in corners, the 240Z danced. Sharp steering, perfect balance, independent suspension. Drivers didn't fight the car. They connected with it. And that's when things started to get dangerous. At first, American drivers laughed. Small engine, Japanese car, no chance. Then, they drove it. And everything changed, because on real roads, not drag strips, the Mustang had a problem. In corners, the 240Z was faster, more precise, more confident, more alive. This wasn't just another car. This was a new way of thinking. And once drivers experienced it, there was no going back. Then came the real test, the track. Because racing doesn't care about reputation, only performance. And the 240Z didn't just show up, it started winning. Against cars with more power, more history. More respect. It didn't matter. The 240Z was faster where it counted, smarter where it mattered. And that's when the truth became impossible to ignore. The Mustang was built for straight lines. The 240Z was built for everything. And that made it dangerous. Because drivers didn't just want speed anymore. They wanted control, precision, confidence. Slowly, everything started to change. Japanese cars were no longer seen as cheap. They were becoming something else. Smart and incredibly capable. Young drivers loved it, because for the first time, they could afford something that felt exotic. Something that looked like a dream, but performed like a weapon. But this was just the beginning, because what happened next didn't just challenge the Mustang. It shook the entire automotive world. Records would fall, races would be dominated, and a new era would quietly take over. And in part 2, you'll see how this underdog turned into a legend and forced the world to take Japan seriously. What happened next, no one saw coming, because the Datsun 240Z wasn't just winning attention anymore. It was starting to win races. And in motorsport, that changes everything. Because on the track, there are no opinions, no brand loyalty, no marketing hype. Only results. And the 240Z began delivering them, again and again. In America, the car entered SCCA racing, a battlefield where American muscle cars had dominated for years. Big engines, big power, big reputation. But the 240Z didn't care. It was lighter, better balanced, and far more precise. While V8 muscle cars struggled with weight and tire wear, the 240Z stayed consistent. Lap after lap, corner after corner. It didn't just fight, it outsmarted. Drivers quickly realized something shocking. You didn't need more horsepower to win. You needed a better car. And that's exactly what the 240Z was. A smarter machine, a driver's weapon. And soon, it started dominating. Race wins turned into championships. Unknown drivers became heroes overnight, and the automotive world started asking a dangerous question. What if Japan is actually better at this? Because this wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. Not this fast. American muscle had ruled with power. European cars had ruled with precision. But now, Japan was combining both, and doing it for less money. That was the real threat. Because suddenly, the average person could buy performance. Real performance. Not just straight-line speed, but something more complete. More refined. And that's when things began to shift. Dealerships across America started noticing something strange. People weren't just looking at Mustangs anymore. They were walking past them and stopping in front of the 240Z. Not because it was louder, not because it was more powerful, but because it felt different. It felt special. It felt intelligent. And once that idea enters the market, it spreads fast. The Mustang wasn't dead, but for the first time, it had a real rival. A rival that didn't try to copy it. A rival that changed the game completely. And that forced the industry to react. Because suddenly, power alone wasn't enough. Handling mattered. Balance mattered. Engineering mattered. And Japan had just proven it. But the story doesn't end there. Because the success of the 240Z didn't just change one segment. It created an entire movement. A wave of Japanese performance cars that followed. Cars that would go on to dominate the 1980s and redefine speed in the 1990s. All of it started here, with this one machine, the Datsun 240Z. A car that was never supposed to win. A car that was never supposed to matter. But instead, became a legend. And today, decades later, its impact is impossible to ignore. Modern sports cars still follow the formula it proved. Lightweight design, perfect balance, driver-focused engineering. It wasn't just ahead of its time, it created the future. And the most shocking part? It did all of this as an underdog. No hype, no expectations, just pure performance. The kind that forces the world to pay attention. And that's why, when people talk about the greatest disruptors in automotive history, this car always comes up. Because it didn't just compete with legends, it changed what a legend could be. So the next time you see a Mustang, remember this. There was a moment in history when something quieter, smarter, and completely unexpected turned it into the one chasing. And that moment started with the 240Z. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe, because there are more battles, more underdogs, and more forgotten legends waiting to be uncovered.